recording. Guy Ritchie and Pulp Fiction. But these are stories where essentially you essentially have a weird kind of situation where when everything has already gone to hell, and then you're trying to tell a story in a time when things have already gone to hell. It's a I'm trying to think of this thing I just saw. It's a really interesting device because you're establishing like what are the norms of society when everything has already gone to hell. I mean, you have those in like post-apocalyptic movies now all the time when people try to show like how would society restructure itself, whether, you know, most of the post-apocalyptic things aren't very good, but I'm not, but there was, I just saw a mini series, I think it was on Netflix, that took place in Berlin right after World War II. It was pretty good.
With the police?
Yeah.
Yeah, we liked that.
And it had a little Jewish stuff in it too, because it was about like people killing Nazis who had gotten away or was trying to get, it was literally like out of the rubble ashes of Berlin. And I cannot think of the name of it right now. And
something after.
It was with the Tyler Kitsch guy, Tyler Kitsch. There was also the good, what's it called? The one with Kate Blanchett, took place in that time also in Berlin right after the war. Anyways, it was with Clooney, George Clooney, and the other
Good
guy.
Wife?
What, The Good Wife? What? No, it was not Good Wife. It was I don't know. Somebody help me with that. It was
The Defeated.
The Defeated. That was the one about Berlin that just came
That's
out.
the one with Taylor Kitsch.
Yeah, and so that was called Defeated, and it was about this group of people trying to rebuild police in Berlin after the war, but and the Soviets and there. I mean, but you know, how do people try to live a life when like there's no law, like there's no structure for it, and it's an interesting. Like part of the reason for these stories and judges are to tell people this is why we have a king, right? But on the other hand, there's a level of, I think it's not just sophistication, it's deeply human, where people are trying to live their lives and they're like, well, like at a certain point, I'm just throwing this out here. At a certain point, we identify with Micah, who's had his stuff stolen. And he goes after the Danites and said, you stole my stuff. You've taken my priest. And he's like, you feel for him because it's his stuff. But everything that he just got taken, he wasn't supposed to have. It was all stuff that he's wrong for doing it in the first place. All this stuff he did was not supposed to be there. So everything he got stolen is wrong. But yet it's his stuff. And the people who stole it are wrong. So it's like, who do you identify with? Like, who's the good guy in this story? There's no good guy. And you're left going like, oh man, this is bad. And you feel for the people, even though you don't want to feel for the people, or you kind of get dragged into this. Oh, like people are just making bad decisions because they can't make any other decision. So I just want to say, this is the type of storytelling that to me hits you right in the gut, because there's no black or white. There's no easy answer. And you're left kind of going, we just can't live like this. We have to make sure people don't ever have to live like this, which to me is like the best way to teach a story, is not to hit someone over the head with it and go, you see what happens when people build idols? This is what, so anyways, I've gone on and on about it, but I do want to point out, you identify with characters in this story and you're like, oh my gosh, why am I identifying with this guy? So back to the Danites, don't talk to us. We'll kill you. You want to shout at us? So
So Micah, realizing that they were stronger than he, turned back and went home. And the Danites went on their way, taking the things Micah had made and the priest he had acquired. They proceeded to Laish, a people tranquil and unsuspecting, and they put them to the sword and burned down the town.
yeah, so even though the people of Laish arguably had it coming because they were not supposed to be there, or they'd given up their rights to be there by the fact that the Israelites were allowed to do this. There's something about this where you actually feel sorry for the people of Laish. There are people tranquil and unsuspecting. It's almost like they were murdered. And they were murdered and they shouldn't have been murdered. You see? These are tranquil and unsuspecting people. But yet, they also are not supposed to be there. They're Canaanite people. Or, they're people who we've kind of been given permission to get rid of, if you will. I hate to say it, but that's what the Bible says. There almost is an admission here that there's a tragedy to this, too. Yep.
There was none to come to the rescue, for it was distant from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. It lay in the valley of Beth Rehob. They rebuilt the town and settled there.
Yeah. So
Cavalry didn't show up.
nope, nobody. Well, they're the other side. We're more of the cavalry in this.
Right.
The Danites
Right,
the Danites are the ones wearing the blue uniforms.
uh,
No, I mean they're the ones with the
they're right. So they're
they're
more
the ones
like.
who have the manifest destiny behind them.
Mhm.
I'm definitely thinking about this because I was helping my daughter with her AP US history projects.
Ah.
It's hard, by the way, to write these, when you're writing essays like this today, obviously they want you to be nuanced about it, but it's not so easy. It's not an easy thing for anybody to grapple with, especially young people, but it's not easy for older people to deal with this kind of stuff either. And the Bible just told us essentially why these people didn't have any reinforcements coming. They're too far away from Sidon, and so they just got wiped out. And the Danites rebuilt it.
Okay, so the Rebel Alliance didn't show up and save them.
Yes. All right. Well, then you compared us to the empire.
Yeah, I did. Well, you did first.
It's true. All right.
Okay. And they named the town Dan after their ancestor Dan, who was Israel's son. Originally, however, the name of the town was Laish.
Yeah. And so it's basically telling you, that place we call Dan, which is in the north of Israel and which is like a major city, that used to have another name. It used to be called Laish when it was settled and lived in by very tranquil and peaceful, loving Canaanites from the Laish people. Remember them? No, because we wiped them out. Yep. So that's telling you a little bit about the history of the Danites, who again, arguably were doing what they were supposed to do, which is settle the land. But there was a consequence to the people who were living there already.
The Danites set up the sculptured image for themselves, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Manasseh, and his descendants served as priests to the Danite tribe until the land went into exile. They maintained the sculptured image that Micah had made throughout the time that the house of God stood at Shiloh.
Yep. And those last two lines are the most important lines. And most people don't even know it's in the Bible. I will tell you folks that this is one of the stories that people didn't want to tell, but they had to tell it. And all of a sudden, at the end of the story, everyone just got, not everybody. I shouldn't say that. Not everybody got named, But the most important people in the story just got named. And the naming of the people at the end of the story, the reveal, if you will, at the end of the story, is mind-blowing. It's as if you told the story, and at the end of the story, you reveal who the person was that was responsible, or who's the main protagonist of the whole story. I won't say hero, but the protagonist in this story just got named. And it's literally like if you did it, and at the end of the story, you say, oh, and by the way, that was George Washington's son, or that was Abe Lincoln Jr., or that was John F. Kennedy Jr. Because the priest just got named, folks. The priest of the Danites, the priest who set up this alternative shrine with the statues that were stolen in the first place, that never should have been made in the first place, the guy responsible for keeping this blasphemous, idolatrous place going, my friends, is none other than Moses' grandson. It's the great scandal of the Bible that most people don't even know happened.
Wow. I didn't know.
How do we know that this happened? How do we know that people have tried to obscure this from happening? Because if you look at the note D right there, we know that Moses had a son named Gershom. He has two sons, Gershom and Eleazar. Gershom means I was a stranger in a strange land. I was a stranger. Remember, he gave him that son, because that name to his son, because when he was in Midian, he was a stranger in a strange land, Gershom. But then it says son of Manasseh. Except that nun really wasn't there. It was added later, and it's a tiny little nun right there.
And if you take it out, it says Moshe.
Yeah. Now we know, and we say today, and it's not like you have to be some radical Jew to say this. There are Orthodox Jews who know very well that what we did this to obscure what happened, as a way to soften the blow to Moses. We don't call him Ben Moshe. That we know this. And again, it's a fiction that not a fiction, it's a obscuration of the truth that we allow to happen as a token of our love and appreciation for Moses, that we don't remind people that he's Ben Moshe. But the story is there because it tells us why Moses's family doesn't become famous after he goes. Because the only living relative we know about from Moses's family is a guy named Jonathan, who runs an illegal temple in Dan. So you can imagine that the priests who wrote most of the Bible and who are descendants of Aaron, Moses's brother, have a real difficult situation here because they can't badmouth Moses. But at the same time, what this guy does is wrong, and they don't want other people to do it. And so they have this real weird trick that they pull here, which is that we're not going to remind people that this is Moses's grandson, but we do want to let people know there's a reason why you don't hear from Moses's family anymore. So this is one of the greatest, if you will, burials of truth that you have in history, definitely in the Bible.
Alternative facts.
Yes, but it's not, it's hiding in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like people didn't know that this story existed, but people didn't study it, they didn't talk about it, and they allowed this Manasseh to continue to be written in the Bible rather than talk about what really happened.
When a little nun is written, does that mean that what does that mean exactly?
It means that scribally, you better not put a big nun, but And again, it's not as big of an issue because it's not in the Torah. It's in the book of Judges, but it's still a holy text. It's still a text that needs to be scribally maintained.
Do we have this in like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and is the nun there?
Yep. Well, I don't know that we have it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have it in, I don't think we have it in the Dead Sea Scrolls actually, but we don't have, I mean, there's huge chunks we have, for those, we've discussed this before, excuse me for repeating it a billion times. We have every book of the Bible, a piece of every book of the Bible found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, with the exception of the book of Esther. But we have every book of the Bible found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but not necessarily an entire book of anything. The biggest scroll that we have is the Isaiah scroll, which is very well maintained, but that's the biggest full text we have. There's a lot of the Bible we don't have. We just have enough sections or enough pieces that we've identified to say, oh yeah, that's from the book of Judges. But this scribal tradition for Manasseh has been kept for a long time. Whenever you see it written, people know the way it's written and why it's written that way. Look, the fact is you can do that with Moshe's name. You can throw a nun in there and change the name completely. It doesn't even sound like the name anymore. But, and again, the vocalization is different, the vowels are different, but not the letters. The letter is one letter off, and throwing it in the middle completely changes the name. But it's very clear who this is. It's very clear that this is an intentional dig at Moses and a reminder of what happened to Moses's family. Because it wasn't just him, right? It says his descendants served as priests to the Danite tribe until the land went into exile. So that means that for hundreds of years, Moses's family maintained this shrine, and it was going on while the ark was at Shiloh. So the ark was in the south, or the central part of Israel, was much further south. How it's not called the temple yet. It's called Beit HaElohim, but it's where the ark is. It's where all the things that Moses and Aaron made. That's all in Shiloh. We're going to read about it in the book of Samuel. All these things ready to go. When we finally go to Jerusalem, we're going to bring them there. But for a couple hundred years, this stuff was in Shiloh. So Shiloh was a major religious center. And yet Moses's family is maintaining this weird northern temple with artifacts that clearly violate the law, but yet they're running a priesthood there. It says, my friends, they are priests there. They are Kohanim. Hayu Kohanim, l'shevet hadani, that they are like personal priests to the Danites for hundreds of years, until 700. So for 300 years, they're serving as priests there. 300 years. It's a long time. Folks, according to this, there were descendants of Moses that were still serving as priests in Dan during the time of King David. I mean, that's the temple is in Jerusalem. There's the ark in Jerusalem. There is the menorah in Jerusalem. There's the altar with all the stuff with the priests and the Levites and the singers and all that stuff going on in Jerusalem. And there's a shrine in Dan being maintained by Moses's family all throughout the time of the temple. That's what it just said. By the way, it also said that this was written after the time of the exile, folks. Whoever inserted that, whoever wrote that, whoever edited that, just told us that this was written after the exile. Or at least the tribe of Dan goes into exile, not 100 years later when Judah goes into exile. But it tells us that this was written the 7th, 8th century. Just told us that line was. So, yeah, this is a weird story of things that go wrong. things that don't play out the way they're supposed to play out, things that happen when people do whatever they want to do. They establish their own priesthood. They establish their own stuff, their own idols. And even Moses's family participates in this.
Do you think it was because he wasn't allowed into the promised land?
Yeah, but neither was Aaron. And Aaron's family doesn't go off the rails, doesn't run it. Now, again, remember, this story has been preserved and edited and transmitted to us by Aaron's family. So needless to say, we're not going to get the whole story. We're definitely not going to get any positives out of it. Though on the other hand, they were very careful to not disrespect Moses, or to try to not to implicate Moses in this. So as much as they wanted to tell you that Micah and Jonathan are bad, they don't want Moses to be implicated, but everybody knows it, and they can't get away with telling the story without telling you the very important part, that this is Moses' own family. And they almost have to tell you that, because that's where the import of that's where this is so tragic, is that Moses' own family was involved in it. So it's kind of, you have to walk a very fine line in how to tell the story. But you understand, so we're not going to read chapter 19. We don't have time to get into chapter 19, because that's going to open up a whole nother can of worms. So the Jewish Sodom story, I promise you, we're going to read next week. For those who were there with us Wednesday night when we read the original Sodom story, you'll have to remember it a little bit longer. But I think you just saw a story, chapter 17 and 18 in the book of Judges, which you probably never read or never heard of, is one of the more dramatic and well-told stories, I think, in ancient literature, because the story is built up with characters that all converge and meet in this weird kind of like drama, almost, it's almost this net of characters that that are going to teach us a lesson by their behavior. And then on top of it, we have a dramatic reveal at the end of the story that just blows there. You literally are sitting there going, oh my God, I did. And the crazy thing about it at the end of the day, by the way, too, because like if you threw that at the end of a movie and the movie was unbelievable and kind of weird anyways, you'd be like, oh, that's just stupid. The fact is that everybody, like, these people, and it really happened. That's the crazy thing, is that when you sit back at the end and you go, oh my gosh, that really happened? Are you kidding me? That's how that happened? So I can only tell you that when you've seen these kind of things happen, or when you've like been hit with that at the end, then you're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. That's nuts. And you never forget those stories. Those are stories that, even though like you don't necessarily know that like the history of it, you don't forget the story. And again, there are dramas like that where you just go, well, it's not necessarily my most interested, I'm not most interested in that part of history, but wow, what a story, I mean, it's just, there are things like that when you realize that, oh, these are true, and on top of it, it's a true story. Wow. So it's a little story that I don't even know how to describe it. It's a drama. It's a historical tale. It's a lesson. It's got everything in it, but it's a story that now is not being shared on Facebook because I didn't record it and I didn't. So you'll have to just tell people that we read this story. They'll have to believe you, and now it's now a part of you. You'll tell this story of this crazy lesson that we learned about Moses's family. Because people ask me, what happened to Moses's family? What happened to Moses's? What do we learn about Moses's family? This is what we know. This is all we know. We don't know anything else about Moses's family. Anybody else have any questions or comments? I want to show you one thing so that like some people are going to go, come on, are you sure this is Moses's family? I want to show you one little clue so that you know that the writer of this did something very clever to also tell you. And I kind of showed it to you, but you may not remember it and you may not have caught it. But I'm going to show it to you right now. Any other comments or questions as I'm rewinding back? Nope. Okay. So let me show you a little thing here that the writer of this did. When we're introduced towards the beginning, when we're introduced to this priest whose name we don't know, the very beginning of chapter 17. This was the first chapter we read. There was a young man from Bethlehem of Judah, from the clan seat of Judah. He was a Levite, and he resided there as a sojourner. Everybody see that?
Gershom.
Yeah. He has the same name as his grandfather, not as his name. He's Jonathan, the son of, but they used the same play on a Gershom. He was a sojourner there, which is the same reason why Gershom has his name. It was not a coincidence. It was not a coincidence that he was there. Look, there's a lot of interesting pieces to this story too. The fact that this guy originally came from Bethlehem, that Moses's family was living in Bethlehem, which is an interesting idea. That why did Moses's family live in Bethlehem? Well, maybe that was a major city or maybe whatever, but a lot of stuff's going on in Bethlehem, folks. The fact that the Levites and the Judites might have met and married and interacted. And according to tradition, Miriam is married to Nachshon, the Judite. And so maybe there's more Levite Moses family connections to the Judites, especially again, this powerful dynasty that was 100%. We do know is from Bethlehem is King David. So whether Jesus was from Bethlehem, interesting article that I can actually share. Well, there's so many articles about it, I don't need to share it, but there's a lot of debate and discussion over whether Jesus was really from Bethlehem, which of course now in the midst of Christmas, you have to listen to those songs and wonder, come on, little child in Bethlehem wasn't born in Bethlehem. The Christian Bible isn't even consistent on whether he was born in Bethlehem. And the idea that he was born in Bethlehem surrounded by shepherds, or were they 3 wise men, the story isn't consistent either. Now, before again, you go, well, it was 2,000 years ago. That's true, but we know a lot about people who lived 2,000 years ago. We know a whole lot about Julius Caesar, who lived a little over 2,000 years ago, lived before Jesus. So the fact that there could be information known about him, the fact that there is information that we know about people who lived at that time, and it's not just Julius Caesar, it's pretty much, important rulers and people of history who lived in a certain period. We know stuff about them. Information was gathered. The argument is that, well, some of this information wasn't gathered until 30 or 40 years after Jesus was crucified. That's fine, but people would have known the information. Clearly, the mythological elements of Jesus's life are what was preserved and what was decided to be taught. And that's why we have the stories about Jesus's narrative that we have. But it's not that it couldn't have been known. That's not an argument that you can make. If people who lived around his time and who were part of his family were alive, people could have talked to those people and written down the parts of his life that were important. They were not important. They were not. They did not choose to tell those stories. Why? That's a matter of opinion, and I don't think you can ever make the argument. You can guess why. You can you can throw out possibilities logically, psychologically, emotionally, why the true story of his life wasn't preserved. But it wasn't preserved, folks. So everything that you've seen in Snoopy and all the other great Christmas stories that you'll be watching over the next week are all based on legend, and they're all based on intentional mythology. So, and it's not uncommon. It's not like it was just Jesus that they didn't tell the birth narratives about accurately. There are other stories that we have. And not Moses, obviously Moses is one of them, but you can make the argument Moses was 1,300 years before Jesus, and that would have been hard to have maybe birth narratives about. But that being said, that are not mythological or midrashic. But it is what it is, folks. And I will tell you that Bethlehem is important. And there was a really important person who came from Bethlehem or very close by, and that was King David, a great hero, a great complex man, perhaps one of the most interesting people in all of Jewish history and maybe in world history, somebody that the Christians wanted to have their leader Jesus connected to for a reason. When we get to King David in about a month, you'll see why. The most developed, the most complex, and the most, in some ways, tragic person that you'll ever meet. And he was a guy from Bethlehem. So, also, again, obscured some of the truth about him, but enough of it's there for you to see. All right, folks. We want to.
There's no class next week, though, is there, Rabbi?
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I'm actually out of town next week. Thank you, Mike, for reminding me. I don't even know my own schedule. Yeah, I am going to be in Colorado next week, God willing. Be'ezrat Hashem, as they say. So I'm supposed to not be here Tuesday. Thank you, Mike, for reminding me. Do not have class Tuesday and Wednesday next week. So in 2 weeks, we will finish the story of, well, not finish, we'll read the story of Judges chapter 19, the Jewish Sodom and Gomorrah story. And it's actually better for us to read that as one unit anyways. I just wasn't sure whether we would finish 17 and 18, but as you saw today, it deserved its own unit, and it deserved for you to know about it without having even more information in your head to bubble over. So we're off next week. Everybody stay safe and stay healthy. Obviously, we're concerned about everyone's health right now, and we know that everyone is doing what they need to do to stay healthy. And
I wanted to tell you Shoshana had her baby.
oh yes, Mazel Tov. I saw the post on.
Yeah.
I know it's Ezran.
Ezra Natan.
Beautiful name, Ezran Natan. And is everyone's healthy, Gail?
Oh yeah, we were it was a little scary, but it was, it took her a long time, but it was okay.
Mazel Tov. That's so exciting for you.
Yeah, we're so excited.
It's the newest addition to your family. We hope that they grow in health. Thank you, Gail, for sharing that on the internet.
Okay.
We really should, again, for those who have seen Gail, have got to meet her a little bit in class, remember her connection to this temple, even though she's not lived in Santa Clarita. Gail, you have, your family's had a huge effect on our synagogue, and you have too, through your daughter Sarah Renson, through your former husband Joe, of blessed memory, and through so many people who, again, you've had a great impact on Elizabeth and a lot of the people that we know. So that's Gail. And Gail has obviously taught our synagogue. She's been part of our women's retreats, and her art pieces that we did, but she really did them, are the beautiful banners that are in our synagogue. Those were works that Gail put together. So thank you, Gail. And Mazel Tov to you. You deserve a lot more good news like that. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. And again, we're off next week, but please join us in 2 weeks. Thank you, Rosemary, for reading. And again,
Happy New Year.
Healthy, happy, whatever. What's the word we use for Christmas? There's a Jewish term for it. I can't remember. Anyways, good Yontif. And we'll see you soon.
Happy New Year, everybody.
See you.
Bye.